Welcome to Equip, Build, and Mature. It's a cool, blustery day here on Crete. But as I like to do on Saturdays, I want to do an overview of one of the books of the Bible. And today we're going to be looking at Paul's letter to Jesus' disciples at Ephesus. So we'll begin with the first of 5 questions as we look at the letter Paul wrote to the saints at Ephesus. Who wrote the document? Paul taught God's truth to Jesus' church at Ephesus for a very brief time at the end of his second missionary journey. On his third missionary journey, he taught God's word for more than 2 years. We read of this in Acts chapter 18, verses 18 to 21, and Acts chapter 19, verses 1 through 41. The city of Ephesus was home for the most famous temple to the Greek goddess Artemis. During Paul's time in Ephesus, he proclaimed God's truth. By faith, many were immersed into covenant with Jesus. Many others opposed his preaching in the synagogues and homes. Now, Demetrius was a well-known silversmith. He made items for worship of Artemis, but his business suffered greatly because people were repenting and committing their lives to Jesus. So he led the people into an emotional frenzy, and Paul was forced to leave the city of Ephesus. But before Paul left, he helped to stabilize and equip Jesus' community of disciples. So what time in history did all this take place? Paul wrote the letter to Jesus' disciples at Ephesus around AD 60 or 61. He wrote Colossians and Philemon around the same time. And he had Tychicus deliver all 3 letters. And Onesimus traveled with Tychicus. We see this in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 21, Colossians chapter 4, verses 7 through 9, and Philemon chapter 1, verses 10 to 12. It was during this time that Paul was in the city of Rome, enduring his first Roman imprisonment. We read of this in Ephesians 3:1 and Ephesians 4:1. Ephesians was one of the 4 letters referred to as the prison letters. The others are Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. So why is this letter to Jesus' disciples at Ephesus so important for us? Well, 2 Corinthians and Galatians are filled with personal details about Paul's life and the recipients that received this letter. But the letter to the Ephesians is just the opposite. It is one of Paul's most formal letters. Galatians has very specific teachings that were crucial for the congregations that were overwhelmed with legalism. But Ephesians deals with issues at the very core of what it means to follow Jesus as his covenant disciples. It speaks of our faith and how we practice our faith on a daily basis. Those are very needed truths regardless of the specific problems a congregation of Jesus' disciples might be experiencing. So what is the big idea in this letter to the Ephesians? Paul divided his letter to Jesus' disciples at Ephesus into 2 very clear sections. And we must first apply the truths in chapters 1 to 3. Then chapters 4 to 6 explain what that will look like through our actions and through our lifestyle. In chapters 1 to 3, Paul discussed God's creation of a holy community, Jesus' church. He did this by his gift of grace in the death and resurrection of Jesus. The members of this community of faith have been chosen by God through the work of Jesus. They are adopted as God's sons and daughters and brought near to the Father by obedient faith as they are born again in his Son Jesus. Each person with such faith, Jew or Gentile, was dead in their sins. But in Jesus, they are made alive because of the person and the work of Jesus, the Son of God. Paul did not respond to a specific theological or moral problem. He tried to encourage and he tried to equip the faith of Jesus' covenant disciples at Ephesus to protect them against future problems. So in the first half of the letter, Paul clarified very deep theological truths. And Paul's very clear purpose was that he expected that community of faith to walk according to its heavenly calling. We see this in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1. Those theological realities must be accepted by Jesus' covenant disciples. And by faith, we must put them into practice in our relationships within the church, in our homes, and with those that we know in the world. So how does this document apply to you and me in the 21st century? The letter to Jesus' disciples at Ephesus deals with a wide range of moral and ethical behaviors. It was designed to make sure that Jesus' covenant disciples were living up to their spiritual reality. As we continue in our faith, from day to day, month to month, and year to year, it is always quite tempting to try to get comfortable, to make things convenient. But Paul clearly presented the gift of God in Jesus and the blessings we receive in that relationship. So what we should be asking ourselves is this: do our lives reflect that reality as they should? How have you grown in your walk with God since you were immersed by faith into Jesus? See, the last half of this letter to Jesus' disciples at Ephesus clarifies that spiritual growth takes place primarily in community with other disciples, iron sharpening iron, as it says in Proverbs 27:17. Your daily walk with Jesus should be characterized by perseverance, unity, holiness, love, and wisdom as you and I live with an awareness of the spiritual war that we are very much involved and engaged in. Maturity produces benefits in the moral lives of Jesus' disciples, but maturity also extends far beyond that. Increased maturity benefits the community of Jesus' disciples at large. It leads us, as Jesus' covenant disciples, to present a more consistent reflection of God working in our lives. Maturity in Jesus also protects us from the harmful divisions and the destructive quarrels that have plagued so many of Jesus' faith communities throughout history. So let's read Paul's letter to Jesus' covenant disciples at Ephesus, and let's learn the principles that Paul was trying to teach them and make application in our lives on a daily basis. Because we want to follow Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life, and the only access to God the Father. Thank you guys for sharing a few moments with me here. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Take care.